Hi, I'm Rick Harsh, author and chief editor of Books, and it has been suggested that I list the best history books. I've often talked about the best books in fiction. I review fiction primarily, but I mentioned history books, and I mentioned recently that amongst the 10 best books I've ever read was a history book, and so I thought, okay, why not? But the problem is, I usually go without notes. I don't like to take this stuff too seriously. But to do this, um, I had to put some order into this thing. Okay, and so I've got this separated into 6 parts. One, I'm going to start with the 5 best history books, according to me. And then I'm going to talk about travel books as history. I'm going to talk about specific periods and events in history. I'm going to talk about fiction in history. And then I'm going to talk about biographies. In between, at some point, I'm going to talk about a major gap in history. And so that'll be it. That's now you've got your outline, and now I have to start talking about history. I should play some music for this. I chose Shostakovich's Seventh for the Rat theme, which is the Leningrad Symphony. It's very much a war symphony. I don't know what. I'd like you to be able to hear it and hear me, but the Rat theme is fantastic. So, 5 best books in history. 5 best history books in the history of books and history. Number 1, Eduardo Galeano's trilogy, Memory of Fire. I've grabbed the third one, which is Century of the Wind, the 20th century. And now what is remarkable about Galeano is that he does it, he presents his history in powerful thematic, I should have thought of the best word for this, shorts. And you can open to anything here, and okay, and I'll just read one. I don't want to. Okay. Sacred Consumerism Against the Dragon of Communism, titled 1973 Miami. The bloodbath in Chile inspires fear and disgust everywhere. Talking about Allende and the CIA. But not in Miami. A jubilant demonstration of exiled Cubans celebrates the murder of Allende and all the others. Miami now has the greatest concentration of Cubans in the world, Havana accepted. 8th Street is the Cuba that was. The dreams of bringing down Fidel have faded, but walking down 8th Street, one returns to the good old lost days. Bankers and mafiosi run the show here. Anyone who thinks is crazy or a dangerous communist, and blacks still know their place. Even the silence is strident. Plastic souls and flesh and blood automobiles are manufactured. In the supermarkets, things by people. He's able to concentrate an extraordinary amount of history in these brief passages, and I think you can, you get Allende there, you get consumerism, you get the history of the Cuban Revolution and the reasons for the Cuban Revolution. At the time of the revolution, the USA was um, uh, taking 80% of the sugar profits from Cuba, for instance. Um, and he does this throughout three, I don't know, I guess he covers about, I think he starts with he starts with some actual, with some folk tales, creation myths, but after 100 pages or so, he's into the beginning of colonialism. And you learn a lot of detail, and you get more thematic punch from these than in any book I've ever read. Um, Here we got, and he covers everything, it seems, that has to do with Latin America, or the hemisphere that it's in, and the United States, and even the world. Here he's got 1942 Hollywood, Brecht. Hollywood manufactures films to turn the frightful vigil of humanity on the point of annihilation into sweet dreams. Bertolt Brecht, exiled from Hitler's Germany, is employed in this sleeping pill industry. Founder of a theater that sought to open eyes wide, he earns his living at the United Artists Studios. Just one more writer who works office hours for Hollywood, competing to produce the biggest daily ration of idiocies. On one of these days, Brecht buys a little God of Luck for 40 cents in a Chinese store and puts it on his desk. Brecht has been told that the God of Luck licks his lips each time they make him take poison. The ironies of history. You get history, and you get the history of everyday life, which is what the second book on my list specializes in. This is volume 1 of Fernand Brauddel's The Mediterranean and the Mediterranean World in the Age of Philip II. Volume 2 is here somewhere. I've read all of this through, and read parts again and again and again. This is the best of. You can see that I've taken a lot of extensive. I've taken extensive notes, and I take my history very seriously. Oh, look at this guy. Huh? I have no idea. Oh my God, you get what he's getting at by just. I will put my finger on the title of a section heading: "The Mountains' Resources and Assessment." The example of Lombardy. Transhumance in Castile. The Adriatic. Emigration from the islands. Nomads who travel far. One thing, I'm going to stop with that because I could go on and on. But one thing you get in here is the sweep of history, and one of the unforgettable characterizations that I've used ad infinitum, because he's talking about Venice, and he uses the phrase, "their agile and dangerous capitalism," which I believe is a forerunner of the capitalism. He would say the same about the United States, their agile and dangerous capitalism. And so you get the sweep of history along with what people were doing day to day. You find out in here the where and how you benefited by your camel, if it had one hump or two. I don't know how much more I can say about this book, except that it was a revolution. I don't think that he started it. I think there was somebody before him, one of his teachers, who started this type of history, the history of everyday life. But it was Braudel who produced the greatest masterpiece in this, and now I'm looking for there it is. Yes. No, damn, that's not it. Number 4 on my list. I'm on number 3 right now, but number 4 is Gibbon's. What is the full title of Gibbon? The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, in 3 volumes. It's a historic classic, and everybody knows all about it. One criticism of it is actually in the introduction to the book, and this postcard comes with the book, or it did in my case. I don't know. Maybe I used it as a bookmark at one point. But he does not write enough about the Slavic nations or proto-nations. He doesn't write enough about the Balkan region. According to its own introduction, I don't know if I would say that's true or not. I don't know. You get swept away in the language, and it covers an extremely important period, and it covers it brilliantly with some of the most brilliant writing you'll ever read, matched by number 5. But let's go back to number 3. I could not find it. I know it's here somewhere. It's yellow, and it's Ibn Khaldun's The Muqaddimah. The Muqaddimah is often viewed as a sociological book, and but it's an early history book that in its innovation rivals Herodotus, Thucydides. Not that you can put Herodotus and Thucydides together, but it was written much later, and what's in the 1300s maybe, 14. Anyway, he comes up with a thematic explanation for change in history. Most famously, the now this is not something delineated in his book because he died before he could see how right he was. But the one reason that we come together as human beings and create societies that grow to become something we could even call a community or a civilization, the reason we do that is to make our lives easier, I would assume. And this is why we've had so many incredible utopian movements in history. I myself am a utopian with no faith. And I believe that we've fucked ourselves once and for all, and that's that. But I think the explanation can be found in the Muqaddimah, where what he says basically is that cities form, empires or cities form, and that weakens people. Now, I'm not sure how he actually says it. It's been a long time since I've read the book, but basically you have this period of change where the people who are living outside, here comes the rat theme. Goes on and on. Anyway, the way that cities are organized and the corruption that arises out of the economic system, it alienates people outside the cities who, up until the age of at some point when weapons became really the exclusive property of the rich, they would lead to outsiders sacking the cities. And this still went on into the Mughal period in India, and then it was colonialism, and that's, I think, at the point where technology and power altered the scenario to the point where the establishment of the corrupt economic system was able to become permanent. There was never again, as far as I know, a revolution of economic proportions that extended to all of the people, to a genuine reorganization of life that valued the human being. And this is what, I think this is why he was considered a sociologist as well. But sociology is part of history, history is part of sociology. And so the Muqaddimah, well, let me just say that Ibn Khaldun and I could sit on my balcony and talk, and he would say, yeah, of course. He'd be surprised at how stupid human beings have become. Maybe he'd be surprised at how powerful certain empires became, so that the outsiders no longer could overthrow them. But in order to overthrow the British, well, we'll get to that. All right. Now the fourth book was Gibbon. The fifth, I sent to somebody just a couple of weeks ago, L.S. Stavrianos' Global Rift, which is the history of the world from a left point of view, and in about 700 pages, covering the, well, I guess, Wallerstein, is it? I can't remember. I don't know any of his books specifically. I don't know how much of him I've read even. I don't remember. But there's no one book of his, but his theory of the North-South rift and, all of that is covered by Stavrianos, a Greek historian who I think lived in the United States. I know he did at some point. I don't know if he was born in the United States. I don't think so. But anyway, he explains the economic. He explains the economic and the role of the economic disastrous lack of equality in income and power in the world, and the dynamics that prevent the poor countries from ever arising out of their state of poverty. So Stavrianos is the fifth. So again, Galiano is number 1, Braudel is number 2, Muqaddimah by Ibn Khaldun is 3, Gibbon is 4, Stavrianos is 5. Now, another place to get your history, and this is a fun one. I don't know how, do I have an example here? Yes, I do. Travel books. Travel books can be fantastic. Ibn Battuta is in my shelf somewhere, but I couldn't find him. From him, you read about monkey rape on the island of Sarandib, Ceylon, Sri Lanka. But you learn a lot of other things too. This is Francois Bernier's travels in the Mughal Empire, and you get a lot of interesting detail about the operations of the Mughals, and about just bric-a-brac of the Indian subcontinent in I guess the 12 years of his travel there. There's another guy called Tavernier, and I thought I had that right down here, and I can't find it. But travel books used to consist of, I wrote down a couple. Cabeza de Vaca is classic. You learn a lot about the difficulties that some of the conquistadores had. Four in particular, one of them Cabeza de Vaca. Very funny book and tragic and horrific. Gives you an idea of how some isolated tribes, root grubbers on on the Galveston Island and inland just a little ways. He was a slave there for many years. There was quite a variety of Indians in non-India. I guess we could call them, I don't know what we would call them, really, but an extraordinary variety, probably well over 1,000 different tribes, and that might include races as well. Another classic is one of my favorite titles. I can't remember what it was titled, but it was subtitled. It was The Monkey Book, I think. Was made from it in Chinese literature. It drew on an actual book about a monk who spent about 17 years traveling through predominantly India to pick up Buddhist classic works. And Shen Chang was his name? I can't remember. Shang, I think, Hsiang might get it, but it was subtitled "Journey to the East," and no, I'm sorry, it was called "Journey to the West." It was called "Journey to the West," and I remember I one time made the remark in something I wrote, that we thought we were the West, this is India. Is the West, but a classic travel book I no longer own. Once read, and you can get a lot of great history from travel books. Another thing to look for is the classics. I gave you the general classics, like the best that exist. But if you want to learn about a specific period or a specific area, there are always people. And I'm going to talk about Indian history a little bit later. But before I start telling you about the dearth of great history written about India, I have two books by Silverfish. Jesus Christ, get out of here. By Dasgupta is his last name, but what was his first name? Ashin Dasgupta. Yeah, and you want to see a picture of him? There he is. Ashin Dasgupta wrote about maritime trade, and this is called The World of the Indian Ocean Merchant, 1500 to 1800, and this is India and the Indian Ocean World. And I could not have written... I've written a lot about India in my fiction. I open with a chapter on India rather than the fucking Mediterranean because I think it makes more sense to start with India. So I've written a history book, and I'm so humble I didn't put it in the best 5 ever written, but I did bring it out. So how humble can I be? But you learn a lot from Ashin Dasgupta, and so if you narrow your focus, you can find experts who have written great books. Some that I forgot to pull out one. If you want to learn about Vietnam and also about the yes, here it is. Also about the Algerian War. This is Jean Latarigue's The Centurions. And this discusses asymmetrical warfare, and so it's got a foreword by... No, okay, not... Is it this one? Which is the... Hold on a second. During the 20th century... Okay. General Stanley McChrystal, I think, wrote about the book at some point, and maybe has an afterword in his other book, which is called The Praetorians. But I think the Centurions is the one that I'm, POW in a notorious Indochina prison camp. This one talks about it begins with the end of one of the most famous battles of the 20th century at Dien Bien Phu, where the French were routed by the Viet Minh. And why were the French even fighting there? What business did they have there? Well, they wanted to extend their colonial years, and it turned out to be a disastrous idea. But ideas like that, the United States they're attracted to. And so by 1950, at least 80% of the French war in Indochina, or Vietnam, included a little bit of Laos, Cambodia, they were supporting it financially, up to 80% of the war effort. And then when an agreement was made to unite and free Vietnam, the U.S. Stepped in and destroyed that treaty ultimately, and then we had the Vietnam War. And if you want to read about that, the best author is Gabriel Kolko, Kolko. I don't know the title of it, The U.S. and Vietnam, perhaps, but that is, there are classics in all areas of history, and you just have to look for them and read about them and find them. You can read a lot of trash about Vietnam, like Stanley Carno, and so on. But what's really great about let me just the French Revolution. I didn't put it amongst the greatest histories ever written because I had another category for it. You want to read about the French Revolution? Start with a general outline, even Wikipedia, and make an outline and get your characters straight, because this will confuse the shit out of you if you don't already have a bit of a background. But if you do have a background, man, this is some powerful writing. Some of the best writing I've ever read. I don't know in terms of history, but turning history into literature is what this book does. I don't think Gibbon quite did that. Maybe he was too concerned about history to do it, but which is fine with me. But here's where you really need to be careful when you're talking about specific periods. Now, I would wager that anybody watching this has some idea of the Korean War. And it goes something like this. The communist North attacked the Free South. And, the Free South was backed by the United Nations, and the North was backed by China. And by God, this happened just right after we found out that the Russians had nuclear weapons, and my God, we're all going to hell here, and it's going to be the big bombs. Well, Bruce Cumins is the best historian for you, because he knows that it wasn't so simple. Now, he's written a simple book, and by simple, I mean it's short enough that people will read it. His classic is a 2-volume book on the Korean Peninsula, but he's written one that's about the size of this, but pure history on the Korean War. And what you will learn is that let me just do it in broad strokes. He does it in broad strokes in one book, but in the other book, it's more complicated. Basically, during the dozen or more years leading up to the end of World War II, I think the rat theme's over. I don't think we got much out of that, did we? So let's go to, let's see, Symphony number 8. Okay, because we're getting to, when you're in the nuclear, era, you've had the worst of field fighting, and the most fear of you've gone beyond the World War I craziness of listen to this. He gives you the feeling of the inescapability of war as it's going on. We don't know that. Most of us are lucky enough not to know it, but I just think this is fantastic. It's the third movement in the Eighth Symphony, if you ever want to hear it, if you're looking for it. But this is war as it's happening. But now what Cummins tells you that you don't know is, and most, who knows anything about the Koreans, for God's sake, we've learned a lot about the Japanese, we've learned a lot about the Chinese, but the Koreans, particularly the peasantry, they lived on a peninsula. They were peninsular people. Like the Vietnamese, they didn't have a north and south, and not even during colonial times. But a division did occur, but it was a societal, socioeconomic division. There were the powerful who cooperated with the Japanese, and then there were most people who fought against the Japanese, suffered a great deal. There was a lot of death and misery over more than a decade and a half. And so when the war ended, it should have been, a people's victory, whatever, they chose to make of that. And over the next few years, there were a lot of rebellions in the South, because there wasn't really a North and South, it was artificial. And the U.S. was in there, and they oversaw some massacres in 1948 that, they actually, supplied the weapons for these massacres. So finally, seeing that there was going to be, there was a movement to divide North and South Korea, the Koreans were, North Koreans didn't exist. They didn't see themselves as Koreans. They saw themselves as, North Koreans. They saw themselves as Koreans, the same as the people in the South saw themselves as Koreans. They didn't, that they were all against the appeasers, except the United States was supporting the appeasers and putting them back in power. And so you can imagine, in U.S. history, there's nothing comparable except perhaps if after the Civil War, some of the most, some of the most notorious slave-owning warriors were, put in positions of power over the South, Horses. You gotta have horses. So, anyway, Cummins, if you want to learn about Korea, if you don't read Cummins or his explanation, you're gonna just be an idiot And you will also miss out on what happened after, to end that war, the brutality of the United States and their bombing of the North. So there you have, specific periods. You can read about any specific period in history. You'll find masterpieces or brilliant people. Maybe they don't all write books. Maybe you'll have to find it in journals. But it's there. And I just happen to know that when it comes to Korea, read Cummins, and he'll straighten you out, and you'll understand the terror of people in Indochina, and they know. By the way, there's a lot about drugs in that region. An unbelievable amount has been uncovered that involves French gangsters, the CIA, U.S. soldiers, U.S. official policy. It's amazing. What is that book called? Shit. We're going so long here. I'm going to do it. I'll be right back. Right back. The Politics of Heroin by Alfred W. McCoy is an astonishing book. And you just, if somebody just was telling you all this shit in a bar, it'd be just another chemtrail Bill Gates wants us all to be vaxxed. Why? Money. All the truth is so insane. And this guy gets into he gets into everything. He's in the field in Indochina. He goes into the gang wars in Marseille during World War II. This is an astonishing history book. Didn't mean to bring it up or go that long into it. But now fiction. Okay, I'm going to go through this quick. Some fiction can teach you a lot about war. World War I, Dobrica Ćosić. I don't know what it's called in English, Land and Freedom or something like that. It was translated in 4 volumes, but Dobrica Ćosić, or Kosic, if, Cosic. An extraordinary book. It's called The Serbian War and Peace. After I read this, I thought, well, maybe I should read War and Peace. And so the next year I did, and War and Peace is not even close. Not even close. I told you about this novel by Lartigue. That's a Basque name, by the way, but he was French. And well, let's see. Mario Vargas Llosa's The War of the End of the World is about something that you probably can go your whole life without knowing about, and yet to understand it. It's kind of like the movie The Wild Bunch, that teaches you a great deal about change in history and the adamantine nature of change, and the loss of spirit, and so on. Fantastic book. Dasha Derndich has several great books. I haven't read Sebald, but he's also mentioned with Dasha Derndich. Of my own books, I would say The Assassination of Olof Palme, because there's stuff in here that has still not been written about and published in the United States, but has been in Europe, and it involves some pretty nasty hijinks that the U.S. was involved with, and it's a lot of fun. I talk about lots of stuff in there. My characters do, and anyway, so that's a good one for you. I'm hurrying now because I'm almost at 40 minutes. Biographies. don't read them unless you've really got a great idea that this is the biography that teaches you about the era and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The psychology of Adolf Hitler is not history to me. The psychology of the German people plays a big part in Nazi Germany, but the little masturbator from that town outside, where was it? I can't even remember. I almost said Austerlitz. Anyway, but history is filled with madmen. What does it teach us? Nothing. Okay, so we'll let that go. And so, as to cut this short, there's a huge gap. Where does history fail? In India, probably the greatest civilization by many measures that the globe has ever hosted. And until the British started fucking it, was the wealthiest country in the world. And, you should look at the economic statistics from, like 1600 and then to today, or, to, the depredations of colonialism have never fully been, it's an enormous topic, but there are things about Indian history that have never been adequately written about. One of them is a major question. If Mahatma Gandhi had so many people willing to follow him and fight for him in the late teens and early 20s, why were they given independence in 1947? What was the effect of Gandhi? What did Gandhi fear in allowing the common people to take control of revolution? I've got a 4-volume set by someone who I'm calling the Antonio Gramsci, by the way, is another great read, but is it only history? I don't know. Anyway, M.N. Rai, he was a communist and became a humanist, and I need to find out what all that means, but he was a major figure, and try to find him in any history of India in the 20th century. Just completely whitewashed. Chandra Subhash Bose is the one, who made it into history by fighting with the Japanese against his own people. But he was fighting against the British, and, he was getting nowhere in a country that was stymied, that, the left was stymied by Gandhi, Nehru, and so on. Nehru was a bit of a socialist, but there's an enormous topic there. And also, I think the great, powerful Indian history of colonialism and after, has yet to be written, that packs the punch of one of these, where is our man Galliano? Galliano! I can't find Galliano. Here he is. Okay, that, you should be able to write about 1,000, 2,000 pages that can pack the punch of at least 3 of these little tidbits of Galliano that bring about the horror of what happened in India and has continued to happen, and how we've come to accept it. But then we get back to the Mukaddima and the degradation of collective humanity. Human beings have not yet figured out, many have figured it out, but they all end up in jail, dead, suicidal, whatever. human beings are on the way out. Climate change is very unlikely to be turned around at this point. The fact that nuclear war has not yet broken out. Speaking of that, there's a good history on the U.S. bombing itself. I don't remember what it's called, but you can. Historians are very important. I have in my The Manifold Destiny of Eddie Vegas, which may not be here and won't be with my press much longer because Zerogram is going to be publishing it in March, and so it would be in bad faith of me to order a lot more copies or any more copies at this point. So I'm running low. I do have some, but I guess none in this area that are, visible. Anyway, in that book, there's a list of every single bomb that the U.S. has dropped on itself. It's over 1,000. It's about 1,070, and there are names for each one. It's utterly insane. So, I think I've given you pretty much everything I can about history books, my idea of history, and probably given you enough reason to run far the other way, because if you live in the United States, if you come to terms, whatever the fuck that means, with what the United States has done, has continued doing, has always done, it's been, as one of my professors who tried to explain Stalin's approach to the United States said he was up against the most, I'll paraphrase here, the most deadly and dangerous empire in the history of the world. Nobody likes Stalin. This guy didn't like Stalin. But, why do, Stalin was, when people say realpolitik, they think Henry Kissinger. And that's right, because Kissinger and Stalin were two of a kind. You put Kissinger in Stalin's place and more people will die. But, the point is simple, that when you look into what the United States has done, it is very, very difficult to swallow for people in the United States. And I think there are many, many ways of looking away, movies and so on. But read a little history, have some fun, throw some eggs at police cars and congressmen, congresswomen, There's nothing you can do, no law you can break that doesn't hurt another human being that could compare. People should be out on the streets in the United States every fucking day saying, we don't want this. But that